Pam here from Pam's Crafty Corner. Welcome back to my channel for another episode of Coffee, Crime, and Crafts. These are bi-weekly episodes typically where I discuss the specific details of a crime while I'm working on a weekly craft project. Today we are going to make our way back to my home province of Newfoundland and Labrador. There is a community on the Northern Peninsula of the island of Newfoundland that has experienced the loss of 4 people in the last 15 years. Now, that wouldn't normally be a notable issue, but these individuals have gone missing, vanished completely without a trace from a community that has a population of only about 2,200 people. There are a couple of theories surrounding the disappearances, and we're going to take a look. So I am all set with my hot coffee in hand. I've got my notes at my side, so let's get started. So today I figured it might be a good opportunity to work on my socks. This is just a regular, I guess, plain sock pattern. A traditional, I guess, we tend to call them now like a vanilla sock because it's just a plain sock. It's a top-down construction starting at the cuff with a heel flap and gusset, continuing down to the toe. I already have one half of this pair complete, so I thought today I could pick up and work on the second sock because I have finished the heel flap and gusset, and now I'm just doing the straight stitching for the foot of the sock. The pattern that I am using, if anyone is interested, is the super simple cuff down sock that was designed by Louise Patterson from Wildflower wool. This pattern is available online. I think you can get it, if you can't get it from the Wildflower wool website, you can get it off of Ravelry. And I'm just using a sock yarn that I purchased from Michael's. I got a few balls of this actually in different colors. I think this colorway is called River, and it's the brand is Loops and Threads, and it's called Perfect Pair. So my stripes aren't lining up, as you can see. I didn't really care about that. I could have just you know, fussy cut my yarn and started it so that my stripes would line up, but I didn't bother. I just picked up from where one sock ended and started the next one right away. I'm not really concerned about whether or not they line up perfectly. The socks will look great together just as they are. So the only thing I have to do with this is continue knitting in the round. I figured that would be easy to do while I'm reading my notes. So let's get started. St. Anthony. So St. Anthony is a community that's located on the very tip of the Northern Peninsula of the island portion of Newfoundland and Labrador. I'll try and insert a map so that you can see where I'm talking about. It has about 2,200 residents, and as with most Newfoundland communities, it's very close-knit. Most of the residents know each other, and several families are related. It was originally settled by the French and Basque as a seasonal fishing station, and it was used because of its well-sheltered harbor. It now relies heavily on tourism, centered around the history of the area. It's very close to the nearby Viking settlement, which is located at Lansa Meadows, which is actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And that was first inhabited in about 1000 AD. And the tourism also surrounds the history of Sir Wilfrid Grenfell, Dr. Grenfell, who was the first doctor in the region. He set up the Grenfell Mission in 1900 and was responsible for a string of hospitals, cooperatives, and schools that were created for people in remote communities. So St. Anthony was the type of town, and it still is probably to some extent, where house doors were often left unlocked. But in the last few years, a sort of dark cloud has been hanging over the town due to the 4 people that have gone missing in recent years. Eerie occurrences for a town named after the patron saint of missing things. Now, after the most recent disappearance of Jennifer Hillier, she actually, I think, if you look up any information on her, she's actually goes by Jennifer Hillier Penny. In 2016, she went missing. Residents have become more uneasy. People have been changing their habits. They've been locking their doors. They're no longer walking alone. They're making sure that they park in well-lit areas if they're working at night. And often when residents are out trying to enjoy their community and the surrounding wilderness, either by snowmobiling or hiking and boating, they're always on the lookout for clues of these missing people that may have evaded some earlier detection. So, you know, the missing people from the community are always in the backs of their minds, which I know it would be in mine for sure. So, of course, in such a small town, there are also rumors of what may have happened to these people and who could be responsible, or if there even is anyone responsible. And there are people still living in town with a cloud of suspicion hanging over their heads. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at each of these missing person cases. And we're going to start with the oldest one, which was in 2002. So we're talking almost 20 years ago now, actually. And we're going to go all the way to present day, to when Jennifer Hillier went missing in 2016. So the first missing person, this one occurred April 16th of 2002. And it revolves around a lady by the name of Mildred Sexton. And she was 47 years old when she went missing. In April of 2002, Mildred's father visited her apartment building. She was living in an apartment. But she was not home at the time. He checked in several times throughout the day and still didn't get any answer. At some point in the day, he located someone to let him into her residence. So I'm not sure if this would have been a landlord or a family member that had a key to the apartment and let him in, but he did gain access to her apartment. Everything in her apartment appeared normal. There were leftovers from her last meal, and there was no indication that she wouldn't be returning. Her belongings were all intact at the apartment. Her cigarettes were even left behind, which her sister-in-law, Sandra Daw, thought odd. Mildred was a heavy smoker, and she would have certainly have taken her cigarettes, at least if she was intending to be gone for any amount of time. So the police were notified of Mildred missing, and they began a search around the local area with the assistance of a ground search and rescue team. And reports started trickling into the RCMP that Mildred was last seen walking on North Street, headed out of town that morning. The police also received a report that she was seen getting into an unknown car on the parking lot of her building that day. So Mildred wasn't the sort of person that would, get into trouble. She did like to attend dart night occasionally, to socialize and watch the games. She wasn't a partier. She wasn't involved in drugs. She had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and she did have periods where she had relapses of her mental health concerns. But for the most part, all indications were that she had been doing well at the time of her disappearance. As more time passed, without Mildred being located, rumors started to circulate as to what could have happened to her. Some believed that she could have wandered out onto the harbor ice and had fallen through into the icy North Atlantic water. Family believe, though, that this is very unlikely. Mildred was afraid of the water. She was afraid of the harbor ice. And even though there were many people in the community that would cross the ice on foot, sort of as a shortcut across town, Mildred was dead set against walking on it and always walked the long way around the harbor, sticking to the main road. Another theory that was mentioned involved a foreign fishing vessel that was in the harbor, and it had left roughly around the same time as Mildred's disappearance. Some wonder if she, being the naturally easygoing and trusting person she was, if she could have been lured onto the boat by someone, and then maybe something sinister had happened to her. Unfortunately, almost 19 years later, Mildred has never been located, and her missing person case is still considered to be open. That's about all of the information on Mildred that I could find online. There isn't a whole lot about her case, and being that she had gone missing several years ago, social media, people posting online about it wasn't as prevalent as it would be for someone who goes missing today. So our second missing person case from St. Anthony happened 4 years after Mildred's disappearance. This time, it was February 26th, 2006. And our missing person was a young male by the name of Andrew Sexton, just 21 years old. Now, I don't think he was related to Mildred, although they do share a last name. But that's quite common in communities in Newfoundland, that you'll have several families with the same name. I'm sure they may have been related at some point back in history, but over the years, it just isn't the case. Like, they're not related. So Andrew was a typical, fairly typical 21-year-old. I'm hoping you can see my knitting okay. I'm hoping I'm staying in camera because it's a bit hard sometimes. And if anyone's wondering what I'm doing when I start the first stitch on every needle and you see me pull my yarn, that's just because I'm trying to tighten up the stitch that's on this needle and the stitch that's on the new needle, so that I don't have gaps or what's called laddering in my sock. So so you can see the fabric is still really nice and straight and flush with no gaps in it. Anyway, let's continue on. So our second missing person is Andrew Sexton. So he was a pretty typical 21-year-old living in St. Anthony. He had a passion for the outdoors and the beautiful rugged wilderness surrounding the community. He enjoyed many outdoor winter activities, especially snowmobiling. In St. Anthony, owning a snowmobile during the winter is almost as important as owning a car. When I was growing up, actually, on the west coast of the island, my family had a cabin, and we owned 2 snowmobiles that my sister and I both actively used from a very young age. So on Sunday, February 26th of 2006, Andrew and 2 of his mates left town early in the morning to head out to a remote cabin area that was west of Goose Cove, outside of St. Anthony. The trip would have been pretty much a full day excursion, I guess was what they had planned. Leave town, snowmobile out, stay for a while, and then head home. Gonna have a little bit of my coffee. So they were heading out for this full day excursion on their snowmobiles. Now, the weather in Newfoundland can be very temperamental at the best of times. That's why we have a very well-known saying here that if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes. It's part of, I don't know if you want to call it the charm, but it's just part of everyday life when you live on a rock in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Although it had been a fairly good day when the boys left St. Anthony, the weather did take a turn by midday when the 3 were on their way back to the community. They got caught in quite a severe snowstorm. And stories about the events of that day differ. And to Andrew's mother, Darlene Pierce, she had said in media reports that something to her just didn't add up. One of the young men with Andrew told Darlene that he didn't know why Andrew didn't come out of the storm as they had, because he was right behind them on his skidoo. The young fella did admit that there was a point that they lost sight of Andrew, but they just kept going, trying to make it back out of the storm. He was surprised, he said, that Andrew didn't make it back. And Darlene found that very difficult to understand. If they were all traveling together and they noticed Andrew was no longer in sight, why didn't they slow down for him to catch up? Or alert someone that he had gone missing? apparently what happened was the two boys that were with Andrew actually returned to the community slightly after lunch hour, and they didn't inform anyone at the time that Andrew didn't make it back. They continued on and went to a friend's house, staying there to hang out for the rest of the afternoon. Darlene recalled Andrew telling her that morning of their plan, and she gave him some money for gas. She left for work, and when she returned home, she hadn't heard from Andrew, but again, she just assumed that, the boys had all returned together and they were hanging out somewhere in town, which was fairly typical. By dinner time, it was dark, and it was Andrew's best friend, Bill Patterson, who started inquiring about Andrew's whereabouts, and he had called the house looking for him, and that's when Darlene started to panic. So they started to make calls, and that's when they realized that Andrew definitely had not made it back to the community and that he was actually missing. So police were contacted at that point, and a search was organized. Unfortunately, the inclement weather impeded their efforts, any efforts by family and friends to search that night. But an official search party did get underway at daybreak the next morning, February the 27th. So I just find that really odd as well. I mean, I know the two boys that were with Andrew were apparently younger than him, like they were in their late teens, I believe. But that just seems really odd to me. If you were out with a friend and the weather turned stormy and you were all headed back together and you got back and one of your other buddies got back and there was a guy missing, why wouldn't you let anyone know that there was, that he hadn't returned? Because of that, unfortunately, the warning alarms about him not being back at the community, no one started looking for him until well after dark. And with the stormy weather, that just complicated matters even more. So they had made it back, Andrew hadn't, and a proper search got underway at daybreak on the morning of the 27th. So there was a ground search and rescue team, the RCMP, there were police dogs, as well as the Canadian Rangers out searching. And in addition to that, at times, there were more than 100 people on snowmobiles searching that entire vast area for Andrew. His snowmobile was located, and they located that in an area known as Devil's Cove. And it was in a heavily drifted snow area near the coastline. The keys were still in the ignition, and it still had a half tank of gas. Very odd. So they found his snowmobile. The keys were still in the ignition. It still had gas, but no sign of Andrew anywhere. Now, Devil's Cove is approximately 10 kilometers from Goose Cove, still outside of the town of St. Anthony. So searchers cleared the snow from Andrew's machine and attempted to start it, and it very easily started. So that's when they started a search of the area then for Andrew, thinking, we don't know why he abandoned his snowmobile here, but he has to be nearby, probably seeking shelter or something of that nature. Anyway, he was not located. They did not find him. 5 days later, to Darlene's dismay, the official search was actually called off. Another blizzard came in which pounded the province, and all measures to locate Andrew had been exhausted. In the spring of the year, another official search was launched at the assistance of family members, looking for any possible clues that could explain Andrew's disappearance. How am I doing? I got one more needle and then I have another row done. So as with small towns, rumors started that the stories told about the events of that day did not just add up. People wondered if something had happened to Andrew's snowmobile. Had it broken down on the return trip? If so, why did it so easily start when it was located the following day? If his buddies had made their way out of the storm and Andrew had been separated from them, but his snowmobile was still in working order, why didn't he just continue to follow the coastline and make it home as well? There's also a discrepancy of where the others say they last saw Andrew and where his snowmobile was actually located. He would have had to backtrack going in the opposite direction for his snowmobile to have been found where it was. So one theory is that Andrew became disoriented during the snowstorm. He stopped his skidoo to check his surroundings and assess the situation, and accidentally got turned around in the storm. Or maybe he had walked away from his skidoo and had simply slipped off one of the many cliffs in the area and fell into the frigid ocean water. Other people in the community, some of them theorized that Andrew's disappearance could be more sinister in nature. Did something happen between the three friends while they were on the trip? Patterson was convinced that Andrew would not have left his snowmobile of his own free will. A snowmobile that was still in working order and leave the keys in the ignition, it was just too strange. Again, to this day, 15 years later, no further clues have been found and Andrew has never been located. The boys who were with Andrew at the time of his disappearance were interviewed by police multiple times, and they maintained that Andrew simply got lost in the storm, and the police actually believe the same thing. That's what they, to this day, presume happened. Andrew was not listed on the RCMP's missing persons site, but they maintain that they still investigate any tips that are submitted regarding his disappearance. So, unknown if, really at this point, if anything sinister could have happened to Andrew, or really is it just a case of fact that it was a young fella who got disoriented in the snow and unfortunately, fell into the water and drowned or succumbed to hypothermia. That would make a little bit of sense as his body has never been located, even with multiple searches of that area after the snow had cleared. So let's move into our third case. This one is of a missing person, Cleon Smith. Cleon was 30 years old, and he went missing on April the 2nd, 2011. So on Saturday, April 2nd of 2011, Cleon Smith left his residence in St. Anthony to go for a winter walk, or hike, I should say, along Goose Cove Road. He was known to walk that road and be very familiar with the area. He would take a path through the woods all the way to what is now an abandoned American military base. I'm not sure if they had radio equipment out there, that sort of thing, that was there during the war, but there are several places in Newfoundland that have American bases that have since been abandoned. They're no longer manned, and they've just been left behind, and are, for the most part, for some of them actually, they've been just reclaimed by nature. So he was dressed for the early April day. He was wearing a black winter parka and snow pants, along with a hat and gloves. And for those of you who are not familiar with Newfoundland's climate, our winter typically starts in November, and we don't actually get spring until very late April into May. Like, there's definitely been snow. Like, we still get snow on the ground in May month. So there were several reports of Cleon walking in the area of Goose Cove Road. The last time he was reportedly seen was around 12:30 in the afternoon. When he failed to return home, and they noticed that the weather, I guess, was taking a turn. A snowstorm was moving in. His parents, Betty and Harrison Smith, called the local police, which is the RCMP. A search party was organized pretty immediately, but their efforts, I guess, kind of got impeded by the weather. They did go out, and initially they started their search at the American base, and they did find footprints believed to be Cleon's. They were located on the road near the base, but again, they couldn't find any sign of Cleon, and as the weather got worse, they had to call off the search for the night. The following day, as the weather improved, there were about 100 volunteers on snowmobiles and snowshoes searching that area. A helicopter was brought in, and a ground search and rescue team from the neighboring town of Roddington also joined the search. At some point that day, there were more footprints discovered, but they were found leading toward the coastline. It appeared that Cleon may have gotten disoriented during the storm and had veered toward the water. So because of that, several boats, as well as a longliner, which is like a fishing vessel, were brought in. The longliner was equipped with an underwater camera, and they used that to search the harbor. The RCMP underwater recovery team arrived on the scene and joined in the search as well, but unfortunately Cleon was never located. So at this point, he was like the third person to disappear from that small community in 15 years. And although his disappearance seems to be caused mainly by a combination of the rough terrain and the weather conditions, it doesn't stop people in the small community, of spreading rumors and trying to connect the disappearance of the three cases. Some people fear that they may actually be connected, but in reality, these cases are very distinct and very separate. The only thing that's really tying them together is the location and the community itself. So that being said, it was actually the fourth missing person, the most recent missing person case that really has left a particularly heavy cloud of suspicion and fear in the community. And that is the disappearance of Jennifer Hillier Penny. Her disappearance happened November 30th of 2016. So I'm going to discuss her case in a bit more depth. There are more details surrounding her and the incidents, as of course it was in 2016. People had cell phones, social media. So there was a lot more information available online that I could find about her. And there have been several news reports, articles written, as well as like investigative reporting done by The Fifth Estate, which is a CBC television show. So it was a little easier to come up with some detailed information on her disappearance and information surrounding that. So Jennifer Hillier Penny was a 38-year-old mother of two that vanished on November 30th, 2016. With a lack of evidence pointing to any direct reasons for her disappearance, it is believed by many that something sinister happened to Jennifer. Her case raised concerns provincially as well as nationwide. It's been covered, as I said, by multiple news outlets, podcasts, and national television shows such as CBC's The Fifth Estate. Jennifer grew up in the small community of St. Lunaire-Griquet. It's located about 25 kilometers outside St. Anthony. She came from a fairly large family. She was one of 7 children. And Jennifer married her high school sweetheart, Dean Penny. They moved to St. Anthony and had 2 children of their own, daughters Marina and Dina. Now, I'm not sure if her name is Dina or Deanna, but it's spelled with one N, so I think it's Dina. By 2016, though, Jennifer and Dean's marriage had become rocky. When Jennifer's mother passed away in September of that year, she decided to leave Dean, and she moved in with her father, Alan Hillier, in St. Lunaire-Griquet, to help take care of him after her mother's death. And it gave her a place to stay away from Dean so she can sort of sort out her thoughts and figure out what she wanted to do. So she started to look for work as well outside of St. Anthony. She wanted to move closer to Clarenville, which is another community in Newfoundland. It's located about 860 kilometers away from St. Anthony. She wanted to move closer to the central part of the island to be closer to her oldest daughter, Marina, who was 21 at the time, and she was living in Clarenville. So Jennifer had actually applied for an administrative position with the RCMP detachment in the town of Glovertown, and she was scheduled for a second interview there. She also began speaking with a lawyer to start divorce proceedings. Her husband, Dean, was aware of all of this, but he did not want her to move. He didn't want them to get divorced. He also had suspicions, though, that Jennifer was possibly having an affair with a male that she had been texting. Friends of hers, though, have since confirmed that this relationship with this male was nothing more than anything. It was strictly a professional relationship. It was someone that she had been discussing her divorce with and getting advice from, and wasn't a personal relationship. However, Dean believed that she was in a relationship with some unknown male. So Jennifer started to become concerned with Dean's escalating harassment of her. He wasn't okay with them splitting up. And he had been seen several times watching her as she left work from the hospital at 4 p.m. in the day. She had an administrative job, I believe, at the hospital in St. Anthony. She developed anxiety about Dean and his escalating behavior, and she became worried, according to her friends, that he was going to do something to her. Because of this, she had set up sort of a safety plan with friends. They would text back and forth multiple times throughout the day, just so that she was in constant contact with someone. So, the week of Jennifer's disappearance, Dean was planning a duck hunting trip to Northwest Arm, which is about a 45-minute drive from St. Anthony. Their youngest daughter, Dina, was 15 years old at the time, and she was still in high school. She was living with Dean in their family home, while Jennifer was living with her father in St. Lunaire, Griquet. Dina didn't want to stay alone while Dean was away hunting. So, although she was very reluctant, based on Dean's harassment of her, she did speak with Dean, and she agreed to stay with Dina for the week while he was away hunting. She said that she would stay at the house so that Dina wouldn't be by herself and it wouldn't interrupt her schooling. She wouldn't have to come down and stay with her at her father's residence in St. Lunaire. So Jennifer put a routine in place for that week. Each day, she attended work at the hospital, and then she would drive home to St. Lunaire, Griquet after work at 4 p.m. to have dinner with her father, and then she would return to St. Anthony in the evening to stay at their family home on Husky Drive in St. Anthony. A few nights into this routine, on the night of November 30th, Jennifer had dinner with her father as planned, and her sister Yvonne was also there. After dinner, Jennifer gave her sister a ride on her way back to St. Anthony, and during the drive back, she had received a text message and a call from Dean asking when she was planning to be home. Now, Jennifer told him that her plan was to drop off Yvonne and then return to the house with Dina. According to Yvonne, she didn't ask where Dean was at the time of the phone call, and they just presumed he was at the cabin in Northwest Arm, and was again just trying to keep tabs on her whereabouts. So Jennifer dropped off Yvonne as planned and told her sister she was going straight to the house to lie down because she had, developed a headache. According to the reports I found, she did arrive home approximately 8 p.m. She drew a bath, and she sent a text message to her daughter, Dina, who was still out, letting her know that she had a headache and that she was going to be taking some pills and she was going to go to bed early. And Dina, I believe, the plan was that she was supposed to be home by 9:30. Or around 9 o'clock, something like that. So when the time came for her to come home, Dina had called her mother for a ride, but she couldn't get any answer. And after a couple of calls, thinking that her mother was asleep because of the headache, she called her paternal grandmother, Ruby Penny, for a ride. Ruby obliged and dropped Dina at home a little past her curfew of 9:30. So once home, Dina crept inside the house to her bedroom, passing by her mother's bedroom door, which was closed, because she didn't want to wake her up. She received a call from her father, Dean, saying that he was headed back to the house and he was coming there to pick up some duck decoys that he had forgotten when he had left earlier in the week. He said he was just going to stop into the garage, get the decoys, and then leave again. So when Dina heard her father outside, she went out. They had a quick little chat. Then they said goodnight. Dean left, and Deanna went back inside and went to bed. All right, starting another row. Just have to make sure I note that on my little book there. So the following morning, December 1st, Dina was woken by her mother's cell phone alarm going off. And it was going off repeatedly. So wondering why her mother hadn't turned off her alarm, Dina got up and went to investigate. She found her mother's cell phone on the kitchen counter. And when she looked, Jennifer's bedroom was empty. Her purse, her jacket, and her boots were still at the house, but a quick check of the house confirmed that she wasn't inside, although Jennifer's car was still parked in the driveway. There was no note indicating where she had gone, so Dina got really concerned. And again, she called her paternal grandmother as well as her father, and they both came to the house. In trying to locate her mother, I believe at some point her uncle was called, who was Jennifer's brother, and he also came by. He discovered that, yes, her car was in the driveway, but the keys were also left in the ignition of the car. So the local police were contacted, and a missing persons file was opened. The police interviewed family and close friends, and at first they thought maybe it was possible that Jennifer had just left of her own accord. However, people close to Jennifer did not think that that was at all possible, especially with all of her personal belongings left behind and her vehicle as well. RCMP conducted several ground and sea searches in the area. A helicopter was deployed for an air search as well as a dive team, but no evidence was ever discovered. And as a matter of fact, a K9 unit was also utilized during the search, but the dog didn't even pick up Jennifer's scent beyond the house. By the 5th day of searching, Local residents were also asked to check their properties for anything out of the ordinary. I should say here as well that with all the people searching, I find it interesting that her estranged husband, Dean, did not take part in any of the searches up to this point. I found that really odd. By day 7, with a lack of evidence supporting a theory of Jennifer having left of her own accord, the RCMP changed the status of their investigation to suspicious. This change led the police to lock down the residence and bring in a forensics team to thoroughly scour the house for any signs of suspicious activity or that a struggle had taken place in the home. Once the initial searches were complete, the police presence was then reduced back to normal levels, and just a standard investigation continued. Jennifer's mother-in-law, Ruby Penny, offered a $25,000 reward for any information leading to the resolution of the case. Although it is clear that Ruby was distraught by Jennifer's disappearance, some people believe that the reward was only offered as a way to hopefully remove some of the suspicion that was being directed towards her son, Dean. Since Jennifer's disappearance, the town has tried to maintain Jennifer's memory and keep her disappearance at the forefront of everyone's mind. Family and friends are still hopeful that some shred of evidence will come to light and provide a break in the case. They feel that the RCMP's investigation was flawed from the beginning, and they believe that more could have been done earlier on regarding the forensic team at the home. Some people think that because the forensics team wasn't brought in until several days after she had been reported missing, that if there had been evidence at the home, there were so many people coming and going from the house at that point, or, that any evidence could have been, lost because of that. Some people believe that someone had to have seen or heard something and, might still come forward and shed light on Jennifer's disappearance. In 2017, about a year after she had gone missing, businesses placed posters featuring Jennifer's photo in their windows. People began placing stickers on their cars. Billboards were erected near the local Tim Hortons, as well as at Fishing Point Park. In October, almost a year after her disappearance, RCMP Major Crimes Unit came back to St. Anthony and conducted more interviews, but they haven't released any details regarding any of these interviews or any further details regarding her disappearance. The CBC show, The Fifth Estate, they did do a 2-part show covering the case, and reporter Mark Kelly interviewed family members and friends, including Dean. And the 2-part episodes, they can still be found online if you want to watch those. You can just do a search for them. As a result of the TV investigation, however, and at the urging of police as well as Dean's lawyer, the Supreme Court of Newfoundland and Labrador put a publication ban on the case, preventing media from further releasing names the police had identified as potentially being involved in the disappearance. Dean he still lives in St. Anthony as far as I know. There is suspicion surrounding him. His lawyer has, of course, advised him against commenting on Jennifer's case. He continues to deny any involvement and maintains that he was at the cabin in Northwest Arm at the time of her disappearance. Although it is known that he did return to the garage at the house to retrieve duck decoys the night that she went missing. And really, without their daughter having actually seen their mother, her mother that night, Jennifer could have disappeared any time after she arrived home at 8 p.m. Remember, Dina didn't check her mother's bedroom when she got home that night because she knew her mother had gone to bed early with a headache. So when she tried to call her and didn't get an answer, she just presumed that Jennifer was sleeping, and she just crept past the room door that was shut when she got it home. Although police have never named a suspect, Jennifer's case is still considered active, and it is being treated as a kidnapping and possible homicide. Every year since Jennifer's disappearance, the family continues to arrange different media stories, vigils, and walks to keep Jennifer's disappearance in the public mind. Her daughter, Marina, has even offered remaining money from a search fund, I think it's approximately $8,500, to anyone who can provide a solid lead in the case. So, what are the theories regarding Jennifer's disappearance? Really, there's only two. Initially, it was thought that Jennifer left of her own accord. She was tired of dealing with her breakup from Dean and his escalating erratic behavior in the preceding weeks. It was put forth that she simply left to create an entirely new life for herself, one away from any ties to St. Anthony at all. Yes, she was looking to start her life fresh, but she had already set the wheels in motion for that. She was moving forward with the divorce proceedings. A couple of weeks before her disappearance, she had removed Dean as a beneficiary on her life insurance policy. She was actively seeking new employment. She even had that job interview with the RCMP in Glovertown, in a community that was over 8 hours drive, and had that worked out, it would have moved her closer to their daughter, Marina. So the second theory, and more serious theory, is that she was abducted and killed. The police believe this to be the case, and I have to say the majority of the public, myself included, believes this theory. Newfoundland is an island, right? The Newfoundland portion of our province is a vast island. It's large, but it is still an island. It's populated with pockets of small communities, and if Jennifer left St. Anthony on purpose, on her own, she would have needed access to money and transportation for sure. St. Anthony is remote enough in winter that you wouldn't get far on foot. There's no municipal transportation or island-wide transportation that is readily available, at a moment's notice in the community, certainly not at night. There is an airport, but she would have needed a plane ticket and her identification in order to board a plane. And her purse, all of her identification, her passport included, was located when they did searches of the house and her personal belongings. The only other way off the island would have been via the ferry, but in such a small, tight-knit population, someone would have seen her after she left St. Anthony. Now, there are people who seem to think that all 4 of these missing person cases are all suspicious in nature and are possibly related. But police don't believe this to be the case. In my opinion, 2 of them are definitely victims of Mother Nature and a storm in St. Anthony at the time of year. And with no bodies ever recovered, it's likely they fell through the ice or fell off a cliff, disoriented from the weather, and fell into the frigid water. The case of Mildred Sexton, it is possible that maybe her mental health did take a turn for the worse and something happened to her. She could have wandered away from the community and succumbed to the harsh, cold conditions, or maybe she actually did harm herself. Unfortunately, her body has never been found, but I don't know if I'm convinced that something sinister happened to her. And of course, Jennifer's case is completely different again. And the fact that she went missing the way she did, and that she was trying to leave her husband at the time, I don't know. It does seem like that is suspicious. And I tend to agree with the police that it would appear that something happened to Jennifer that was not natural. So that's pretty much all the information that I've gathered on those 4 cases. I know that this week's episode is a little bit lengthy, but I wanted to make sure that I included as much information as possible. Thanks for joining me for this week's episode. Please give it a like and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any upcoming content. I upload coffee, crime, and craft videos every second week. And I also post videos of my various crafts. However, I will say I haven't done an updated crafting video since just before Christmas. I plan to do that on this week off. I have a full week off from work. So you can keep an eye out for an update from me pretty soon. If you want to help support my channel and the time it takes to research and prepare each episode, please feel free to check out the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description box. A coffee is always appreciated. Until next time, stay safe and enjoy your crafting.